Welcome to Moneyway Media, a storytelling platform built brick by brick, where conversations become lessons and experiences become perspective. This is the mindset of a panther, moving with patience, discipline, and purpose. From podcasts to books to media storytelling, CJ Moneyway brings voices, journeys, and real conversations to the forefront. You're now listening to the CJ Moneyway Show.
What's up, my good people? Welcome to the CJ Moneyway Show in association with Believe Network and GI, the state's capital, where we explore untold stories behind resilience, purpose, and personal growth. Today's guest is Doug Lawrence, a grief mentor and the author of Grieve, the Silent Pandemic. After the loss of his beloved wife, Doug turned his pain into purpose by mentoring others through their darkest moments and bringing attention to what he calls the silent mental health pandemic, affecting people worldwide. Doug's insight on grief, healing, and connection will leave you reflecting deeply and moving forward with greater compassion. So welcome, Don.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. So, Doug, man, let me ask you, man, can you take us back to the moment you knew you had to write Grieve, the Silent Pandemic?
Oh, my goodness. It would have been around the time, it was just before Deborah passed away, my wife. And that was sort of the push or the nudge that I needed to say, okay, you've got to do something about this because what you're going through is not necessarily something that you would hope others would have to go through. So it was probably right around that time frame. So that would have been 2021, 2020, I guess, right around that time frame.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, man, how long was you married, man?
43 years.
Man, I was just listening to you, how you say that you came up with this idea before the passing of your wife. It's amazing how sometimes some things come to our minds to do certain things, but we don't see what's about to happen down the road. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times we thinking that certain things are for other people and that we may be doing it for other people, not knowing that we're about to go down the road and the same thing that we're thinking about, the same thing that we're on, we're going to have to fall back on this ourselves, man. Life is challenging, but I'm glad you was able to endure it, man, and come through and write something for the people, not only for yourself, because I know it was healing for you as well. So let me ask you, Doug, man, how did losing your wife change your understanding of grief?
You know, it was the actual being immersed in it and trying to figure out, okay, what would Deborah expect of me to be able to get through this? And, you know, it certainly can't be that I can't do anything or do nothing, I guess. I can't do nothing because she would expect more of me than that. And that was sort of when, you know, from my perspective, that was when kind of my sense of purpose shifted from what it had been to now this is what my sense of purpose is to be able to write the story about how grief impacted us, Deborah and I, but more importantly, how other people that are out there, and there's lots of grief, hence the title of the book. There was lots of people out there that were struggling as much as what I was, that I thought I could. And I now know that I can make a difference in the world simply by, you know, helping people grieve, helping them cope with that, and helping them to be able to create a healing journey that they can go on in order to deal with their own personal grief.
Yeah, because, you know, it's better, or I'm not going to say better, but when somebody don't go through something, like I lost my father, I lost the father, but my mother lost the husband. Yeah. And, you know, and in your case, when certain people don't go through certain things, you can't fully understand how somebody else really feels. But when you can get deep and give people your personal testimony on how you feel, it can open up other people as well. So, you know, kudos, man, to you, Doug, man, for standing strong and standing in there and not only dealing with it yourself, man, but able to build up and be strong enough, man, to help others go through what they're going through as well. Because I know firsthand how devastating that can be, man. Because I've seen it through my mother, So, and we going on 10 years this year. November be 10 years, and it's still at times be hard. Like, he died November 22nd, and she just told me not too long ago that every 22nd, don't matter what month it is, you know what I'm saying, it always bring back memories, and she get emotional and start crying and everything like that, man. So, yeah, it's tough, man. So I'm glad you hanging in there, man, trying to help others, overcome what they're going through. So, Doug, man, let me ask you, man. You took a framed photo of Deborah to your writing retreat. That detail was powerful. Why was that so meaningful to the process?
So, taking the big photograph on that trip that I went on, where I was going was actually where we are first posting as a Royal Canadian Mounted Police as a married couple. So that community was where we got sent for me to do policing, and eventually Deborah she ended up working for one of the bank's financial institutions. But it allowed me to take that step back to sort of relive some of the good times that we had. I even went so far as to, go, and I found the house that we had lived in. And I thought, I have to be careful here, because it could appear as though I was stalking the people that lived in this house, because I made 4 different trips back pulled in the driveway, paused and looked, and I could actually see the window into the basement suite that Deborah and I, that we shared. So it was taking me back to that. And it was also very beneficial or helpful for me to sort of capture at that moment how I felt, because I knew that it would play an integral part of the book.
So you're drawing some strength and inspiration from the picture and the memories that you and her shared, man. That's pretty cool. So let me ask you, man. I guess that ties into this next phase of questions. The mental health crisis we don't talk about. You describe grief as a silent pandemic. What do you mean by that?
I want your listeners to sort of think back to when COVID landed on our doorstep, and the word pandemic became one that was sort of something we talked about on an ongoing, regular basis. And my suggestion and the research that I've done has said that the challenges that we're facing today with mental health are a pandemic. The challenges that we're facing today dealing with cancer and the challenges that we're facing dealing with grief, they're all things that if you take a look at them, they're not much different than COVID, in that we're all experiencing it. And the magnitude of each of those things that I just mentioned, the magnitude is such that we are at a pandemic level or stage, and people need to, start to do some things that we were doing with COVID, but we would never think, oh my goodness, we can't talk about the aspect of mental health and that, because if we talk about it, people think we're crazy and all those different things. So it's just the fact that it's grown to a point where it is, in some cases, almost out of control.
Yeah, because you're right. That's something that we really don't want to talk about. Some people feel as though, that's not them, and going through all type of situations. And yeah, you think back to the pandemic, you wanted to be isolated. You didn't want to be around nobody. We had to wear the mask. We had to do all type of things. So I like that analogy that you brought along with that. So let me ask you, why do society have such a hard time holding space for grief?
A lot of it is that people prefer, or what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of people that just prefer to deal with it on their own. And that may be to do nothing. Because I lost my mom first, and I didn't process her leaving, her passing fully or completely. Then along, what happens next is then Deborah comes in, and for me to deal with the grief that I was feeling and having to deal with that pertained to Deborah, was a lot more challenging, a lot more difficult because I didn't fully process the loss of my mom.
Mm. Yeah, that's crazy, man. I just talked to a young lady last week and she had a miscarriage. Her and her husband, they was trying to plan a family. She had walked off, a corporate job because they were finna start a ministry. Shout out to Don Sanders. She said that she had a miscarriage. So, they went on. She had another miscarriage. So that's 2 miscarriages that she had. So, as you said, dealing with the grief of, losing 2 children and things of that nature. And then she said all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, after losing the second child, her husband passed away. So as he was out running, taking a jog, and he passed away. So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about her as she was telling me her story. You just lost after loss after loss, and then to lose your husband. Like, where do you pick up the pieces at? You know what I'm saying? Like, that got to be devastating. It's devastating when you lose someone anyway, but to have these back-to-back losses, I'm pretty sure, like you say, sometimes it's hard to process one, and I didn't fully heal and grieve, for that one, and then to have something else to be layered on top of that. Put me in the mind of the story of Job when he just lost everything all at one time. Like, how do you endure? Let me ask you that question, Doug. Somebody who's been through a difficult time on a personal level. How do you pick up the pieces, man, and have the strength to move on when you are hit with such a devastating tragedy?
For me, and part of it is spiritual. So for me, what I did with my mom and what I did with Deborah was, number one, I had access to, as do a lot of people, I had access to counselors and that helped all of that. But what was important for me was, had my mom and my wife, had they both been able to end up in a place where they're in a better place than what they are today and without the suffering and that. And so I went to a psychic or a medium, and I don't share this part very often, but I do recommend to some people that come to me for help and guidance and all of that stuff, I do suggest that you may want to, reach out to a medium or a psychic. And what I'm after is getting the closure on the passing of my mom, number one. Number two, getting closure on the passing of my wife, Deborah. And if I can get that, then that starts to change how I view the healing journey. And it helps me on that journey itself. It does indeed help me to be able to move forward to deal with some of it, because it is difficult to deal with grief if you don't have coping skills in place to be able to deal with it.
Mm. So let me ask you, Doug, man, like coming on interview shows like this and sharing your story, being transparent, sharing your story and giving all of you and what you have been through, how difficult is it every time you get ready to come on a podcast to talk about about this situation, man? How difficult is it to you, man, personally?
At the beginning, it was extremely difficult, and I would become very emotional. I do experience periods even to this day where if I allow myself to go back to when some of this took place, I can become very difficult and very emotional for me. The most important thing, though, that I have found, and you've touched on something, that's so truthful, is that for me, anyhow, what it is this telling the story, telling, as I call it, Deborah's story, is all part of my healing. It allows me, it's very therapeutic. It gives me the opportunity to share that story and tell how I feel and how I'm dealing with stuff and all of those things. And so for me, I think I found that while it is difficult, it is also something that I need to do.
So let me ask you, Doug, as we in this process right here, what are the consequences of suppressing grief or expecting people to move on?
Well, the consequences, I think, for me, in not being able to deal with that is that my mental health would indeed become more challenged. So that certainly is the one thing. And I think for any one of our listeners today is that if you keep it bottled up inside, eventually it takes you down a dark path, and it's that dark path we want to try to avoid as much as we possibly can. And I know that I have had those times where I thought, I don't understand. I can't answer the question, why? Why did this have to happen to us? Why did it have to happen to me? I can't answer that. I don't have the answers to those questions, but I can certainly try to find people that I can open up to and share my story, Deborah's story with, because I know that that's going to help with my healing journey, and it's going to give me a deeper understanding of what others are going through and what might be some of the coping skills that they could use to be able to navigate through that piece.
So on that note, Doug, let me ask you, man, because you said you had to find people that you can trust, who you can, release yourself to, because especially as men, it's hard for us to release certain things. We suppress certain things. We hold on to certain things. And, we may talk around the surface on certain situations or certain issues, but I'm taking it as what you're saying. Like when you're going through something to that magnitude, you really have to open yourself up in order to get true healing, And so let me ask you, so on the flip side, mentorship is healing. How does mentorship intersect with the grieving process?
So it becomes one of the coping mechanisms that I can use, that anyone can use in dealing with the grief. Because what mentoring teaches you is that it's more about asking questions to help guide people. So it's more about listening and hearing, what the person is saying. So when I work with people that are struggling with grief, what I try to do is get them to tell their story. And by doing so, I'm using mentoring processes and concepts, all the fancy words. But what it basically is getting them to listen and hear what the person they're working with is saying. And then sort of storytell is probably the most important thing. Is I tell a lot of stories when I talk with people. And I try to get those stories to be as relatable to what they're going through as I possibly can.
I like that. Breaking it down to simplicity. Breaking it down where you can understand it in the simplest form and can fit the narrative and not talk over people's head, because sometimes you can talk over somebody's head and they don't catch it. But I like how you say I bring it in the storytelling mode where you can understand it a little better. So let me ask you, man, can you share a story from your mentoring work that highlights the power of human connection in healing?
The one that comes to mind is working with a young lady who had lost a family member and was having a difficult time in dealing with that. And every date, as you had talked about, dates and stuff like that, how they were triggers. And she was going through much the same sort of thing where everything was a trigger for her. And every time it happened, she broke down and had actually at one point had talked about her demeanor, her behavior, and that moving more to the dark side, so to speak, to be able to, that was how she was going to cope with things like that. And so she got introduced to me, and we started out simply by me not being forceful and me not being sort of saying, you need to tell me, how you're feeling and everything like that. I did it with, I wonder what would happen if we were to change how we feel. I wonder what would happen if we were to look at things from a different perspective. And so I'm making suggestions, but I'm not saying, I think you need to do this or I think you need to do that, because what I want them to do is, at the end of the day, they need to own the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so how we need to work together to be able to get there. And that's where the mentoring process and concepts, that's where that all comes into. Because one of the catchphrases or part of my research is that mentoring can be part of the support structure for mental health.
So let me ask you, Doug, man, what advice would you give to someone who wants to support a grieving loved one but doesn't know how?
One of the main things that we need to make sure of is that we're mindful of, and how I describe it is we don't cross the line. So what we can do as a mentor, so the listening and the hearing and all of those positive things, we don't want to cross over into the space that would normally be occupied by a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. That's their field of expertise, and we need to respect that. So what I typically will do is, after I've built a trusting relationship with a person, they will normally very readily share whether or not they're seeking or are taking advantage of professional help from other sources.
So, man, that's deep right there. So let me ask you, Doug, man, moving forward, as we can stay in the gloom and we can stay down and out. But it's a lot of times, even through difficult, tough situations, man, we got to strap up our boots, put on our pants, man. We got to move on. And like you say, a lot of things that you're doing it in the memories of your wife, not to only help yourself, but to help others in the process as well. So let me ask you, Doug, man, building a better future. You mentioned the importance of preparing our children for grief, which is hard in itself too. How can parents do that better?
After the passing of, and I know from my family's perspective, so I lost my wife, my kids lost their mom, my grandchildren have lost their great grandmother, and she was someone who was very, very special to them. What we try to do as much as we possibly can is to keep those memories alive as much as we can. So, you have family dinners and you set a seat at the table for grandma or for Deborah, so we know she's still with us and stuff like that. And it's just that you want to get to a place where she just becomes a part of everything that you do, say and do. And this is insignificant to a lot of people, but I went to my son's place for Easter dinner, and I hadn't been there very much, and so I was kind of glancing around, and I spotted a picture of Deborah up on one of the bookcase or one of the shelves. And as I panned the room, I saw that and I went, oh my goodness. And that evoked, I had to be very strong, because right away my tears started to well up and I started to think. So, that's an example. And I know both of my kids have got memories, mementos of Deborah that they keep quite visible in their house. And so when I show up for a visit or whatever, I know that Deborah's there with me as well.
So let me ask you, because although, like I said earlier, my mother lost her husband, you lost your wife, and children lose their father or their mother. And although it's different spectrums, it is different ways. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was the first one there about the passing or whatever. And, it's kind of difficult, you know what I'm saying? But that's on my level, though. That's on my level. And so, yeah, it is certain things that triggers memories for us as well, and like you say, just going over there and not really thinking about it, then you see a picture like, whoa, catch me off guard, so now those emotional feelings start coming to you. But then, like you say, it's the realization too, like, not only am I going through this grieving period and grieving season, because everybody grieve differently, or this grieving season, I have to understand too that they're going through something too, because, man, especially a mother, I can't attest to that, thank God on my end right now, I can't attest to that. But man, like I say, a certain thing, when you haven't been through certain things, you really can't, give people advice or whatnot. Say, well, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You know what I'm saying? No, you don't know how I feel because you ain't been through it. So let me ask you, Doug, what societal shifts would you like to see in how we support mental health and grief?
I think we need to get to a place where we acknowledge and we accept that people will be fighting mental health challenges, and they will also at some stage have to go through the grieving process, or maybe they choose not to. I've heard some of that more recently where people have said, well, I've decided I'm not going to grieve, and that's not who I am. I'm just going to move forward and deal with things that way. And what they don't realize is it comes back to what we talked about earlier about the compounding of the grief and stuff like that. So I would say that dealing with the grief and the mental health as much as we possibly can and trying to keep it at the forefront. So, like, I'll give you an example. What I mean by that is that I was mentoring a young lady who was starting her own business, and we met. Our first meeting was done virtually, and so I told my story right out of the gate. I shared what I had gone through with post-traumatic stress and now grief, dealing with the loss of my wife, Deborah. And because of me being open and willing to share, she ended up saying that, well, I guess if you're sharing, then for me, she was able to tell or share the fact that she had been diagnosed with 4 different mental health issues, and she was seeking professional help, but she also felt that I could bring value or offer value to the relationship simply by acknowledging the fact that she was struggling with mental health issues and stuff like that. And so you see, part of why I brought that forward was the fact that we don't understand, even when we, in normal day-to-day stuff, like a young entrepreneur trying to start a business, we don't understand as well as we could that if they have mental health issues, that's going to impact their ability to grow their business.
Well, I hadn't thought about it. Hadn't thought about that like that, because I guess you said there's something blocking you from moving forward if you're not dealing with what you're going through. And I guess that goes back to what you said earlier. A lot of times we need counseling, therapy and things of that nature. But you said something not too long ago, too, that was kind of intriguing, where you say that some people say that I'm just going to go through this, I'm not going to grieve. I'm just going to go through it. Man, this is what I would say. I can't speak for nobody else. When you lose somebody you love, I don't care how strong you are, how tough you are, or whatever, how manly or what, it's going to hit at some point, and when it do, boy, watch out, because tears, that's when you get that uncontrollable crying. You know what I'm saying? When you can't stop crying. And like when you was a kid, I used to get whooped. You go, I mean, it just happens like that. When you love somebody and you can't talk to them again, and you can't see them again, all you have is, like you said earlier, all we have is memories, and you trying to, think about it. It hurts. I mean, that's just bottom line. So Doug, man, I only got one more question for you, man. I enjoyed you opening up and sharing yourself on the podcast today, man. But I do have a quick fire round where I will ask you 5 questions and you give me the first thing that comes to your mind. And everyone who has came on this show, except for one, because I told her at the beginning of the show that we was going to do it, so I kind of gave her a cheat code. But everybody has at least slipped up on one question. It's not as easy as you think, but it's very simple, as you said earlier. It's very simple and simplistic, man. It's not going to be hard at all, Doug. We're going to have some fun. But let me ask you this last question, man, before we get there. What's one thing you hope readers take away from your book?
That it's okay to ask for help.
It's okay to ask for help, people. It's okay to ask for help. We all need help sometimes. The Bible says say that 2 are better than 1. The 2 are better than 1. Because if one fall, you have somebody there to pick you up. And sometimes we all need to be picked up because we get hit with issues of life. And so, Doug, let's get into it, man. You ready?
All right. Bring it on.
All righty, man. Don't be scared, man. What's one book besides your own that changed your life?
it would be Ken Blanchard, and it would be either Gung Ho. No, Gung Ho would be the best.
Gung Ho. I like that. A mantra, a quote that carries you through tough days.
I'll never leave you on the island by yourself.
My man Doug say he not gonna stumble today. Who's someone that mentioned you through their own grief?
It would be my children.
What's your go-to way to reset your mental wellness?
You know, it's surprisingly enough for me, what it is to do the reset is to call up somebody who I am good friends with that I know will listen and hear and go for a cup of coffee.
One last question, Doug. Man, you're doing good. You're doing good, Doug. I think you finna pass with flying colors. One word that describes your mission moving forward.
One word?
One word.
Sharing.
Sharing. Exhilarating. Exciting. Good times. Doug. So let me ask you, man, where can we find you on social media, man? Where can we find your book? Where can we pick up your book from?
So the book is available on Amazon.com, so you can get it there. You can access me through my website, www.talentc.ca. And if you want to reach out and you want to discuss what we've talked about, or if you have some personal questions and issues that you yourself are struggling with and would like some help, you can reach me through LinkedIn, so you can find my profile and just direct message me there, or you can reach me through the website, or failing that, you can also just send me an email and I'll get back to you. And my email is doug.lawrence, LAWRENCE, at talentc, so the word talent with the letter C on the end.ca, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can.
So you heard it from Doug. He said if you hit him up, he's not going to leave you stranded. He's going to hit you back and give you some solid wisdom. Hey, thank you, Doug, man, for coming on the show today, showing your vulnerability, wisdom, and your willingness to lead from the heart. Your journey in this book, Grief, the Silent Pandemic, is a reminder that healing happens when we're willing to face our pain and walk with others through theirs. Listeners, if this episode spoke to you, please check out Doug's book and visit ParadisePublishingHouse.com. And he said you can also get it on Amazon.com. And if you really want to have a personal touch with my man, Doug Lawrence, check him out on LinkedIn. Just find his name on LinkedIn and he'll get back to you. Remember, we are not alone. And when we tell the truth about our grief, we help others find their way too. This is your boy, CJ Moneyway, on the CJ Moneyway Show, powered by GI, the state's capital. Be on the lookout for the new animated series created by your boy, CJ Moneyway. Thank you for listening. This is CJ Moneyway and my man, Doug Lawrence. We out of here. Peace.
You've been listening to the CJ Moneyway Show. With real stories, real lessons, and real perspective come together. Remember, move with patience, move with purpose. That is the mindset of a panther. Until next time, keep building your legacy, brick by brick by brick by brick.
Music style.